Welcome to our December book club. This month we read Girls on the Edge by Leonard Sax. I've had so many discussions with a lot of you about this book already. It covers just so much information from a girl's sexuality to her spiritual growth, and it's a lot to cover, so we're just going to get right into it. I was able to skim this book over the years as my eldest is a girl, but for this book club, I finally got a chance to read it cover to cover, and it was so enlightening and heavy at the same time. It kind of reminded me of our last book a little bit. I know they're totally different books, but when we read Brave Learner by Julie Bogart, we went chapter by chapter because there was so much we could implement. Even in this book, I felt like I could have gone chapter by chapter and just implemented everything before moving on to the next chapter. But alas, here we are. We decided to do the whole book. So now the edition that I read right here, Girls on the Edge, it was published August of this year, actually. I know some people might have an older edition, and from reading the newer edition, it seems like larger chunk of the information is the same with some added information that includes social media, technology, and in some cases, some newer data. But the bigger chunk of it is mostly the same. So Dr. Sax begins by discussing the 4 factors that he believes are putting girls at risk. And they include sexual identity, social media, dreams and obsessions, and environmental status. Then he also leaves the last few chapters to discuss how to nourish and nurture our daughters' minds, body, and spirits. Now, I'm going to do my best to divide the book equally in this hour, but if we feel like we want to discuss one topic more than another, then I'll definitely adjust the time accordingly. So a little background about myself. I have 4 children, alhamdulillah, and two of them are girls. I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter. So I'm at a lot of different phases in life with both of them. And I really enjoyed the book because it referenced girls from 5 years old to college age. So the book goes over a great range, but it keeps it relevant for the most part. I also learned a lot actually about myself and my own tendencies based on how I was raised. So I feel like I did a lot of digging, inner digging because of this book and be like, wait, am I like that? Or this happened to me in my childhood. Maybe my tendencies are like this because of that. So I hope you all get a chance to do that as well, do a lot of self-searching because of it. And with that, so let's get started into our first chapter, which is the first factor, sexual identity and sexualization. Dr. Sax mentions in the book that our popular culture now pushes elementary school girls to dress and act today in ways that would have been pushing the envelope for middle school girls 20 years ago. Now, honestly, I feel like it's not even popular culture at this point. It's sometimes the only things that are available to buy for girls are too short, non-existent, or just completely inappropriate, not even from an Islamic perspective, but just from how we grew up in the culture, 10, 20 years ago even. If you've ever been shopping for girls, even young ones, you'll know exactly what this is referring to. It's not even the clothes a lot of times, but a lot of the TV shows and even toys that are promoted for girls, they push the sexualization. I'm sure some of you may have seen I think it was an LOL doll or a troll doll with the hole in the bottom, and it really caused such a stir up when a mom posted it on social media and said, look what the toys, look how this doll was made. And again, doesn't just go with the toys, but also goes with clothes and things like that. He mentions that culture today promotes this. Modesty is a consequence and manifestation of the patriarchy, and that female immodesty is a sign of liberation. Now, this is such a difficult premise for us, especially as Muslim women, when we believe the exact opposite. We believe that modesty empowers us. Now, there are several instances from the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the lives of the Salaf, which show their strong sense of haya or modesty. They would rush to cover parts of their body that became exposed inadvertently. It's said that some of them even bathed with a covering cloth and remembered to retain their haya in the most extenuating circumstances. There's a famous case of a female companion who, on hearing of the death of her son, stepped out of her house only after wearing her hijab, saying, I may have lost my son, but I haven't lost my haya. Now, Dr. Sachs mentions that how you dress and your clothing makes a girl think and judge her own body when she ought to be thinking about geometry or Spanish grammar, for example. And he continues and he says that this is where parents come in. Parents have to be willing to assert their authority. Now, we had a big discussion with my own daughter last year about hijab, for example, and beyond her hijab on her head, we had a whole discussion about what kind of clothing we expected her to wear, and what we allowed and what we wouldn't have allowed from then on forth. And one thing I didn't do was make it a frilly topic. I was very precise and it was very clear with her. And I in terms of telling her that, you know, when you turn 10, you're going to start wearing hijab. And let me know what colors you want. Let me know what materials you like. Let's experiment and let's find something that works for you. And especially on this day and with hijab, shopping for our girls is so difficult, especially if you're trying to find something that's long sleeve, long thigh to knee length shirt so that our daughters are properly covered. But I know it's definitely been an experience for us trying to get her to, it's not more like try to get her to wear modesty, but finding that stuff, finding the modest clothing. Does anyone want to share their shopping experiences with their daughters or any hijab experiences or any questions about sexualization? I'd love to hear them. So one thing I noticed about sexualization is that it's become even more prominent for me, especially because I have a son, and seeing things that he goes through or seeing things that he does. And it's just so clear, certain things that happen. For example, last year, my son was playing baseball, my daughter was playing softball. Very similar sports, little different rules, but for the most part, they're the same, right? Now, my son's uniform shirt was a nice t-shirt. It was loose fitting. It like went down like past his hips. It was very comfortable. He looked great, loved the uniform, right? And for the same township on the other side of the field where my daughter was playing softball, her uniform was sleeveless. It was shorter, just covered her just above the hip actually. And it was very fitting. It didn't look comfortable to wear, but that was the uniform for women. Now, why? Why did we need two completely different types of uniforms for the same game, right? And it's true what they say, right? Because even in the book, he mentions that sports were made for boys. And even if a girl plays a sport, it's a way to sexualize her, or it's a way for it to be entertainment almost based on what she's wearing. And you'll see that in all the sports. My daughter also plays soccer. And right now she wears a youth large short. Her shorts are youth large and they go right like above her knees, right? She also wears these athletic pants like underneath, but her shorts go above her knees a little bit. Now, the next level up is for her to wear a women's extra small. So after youth large, you go women's extra small. Now the women's extra small shorts go even higher. They're smaller than the youth large shorts. How does that work? Well, that's how the system is made, right? That's how we begin to sexualize our girls at such a young age. Now, I want to make another note about a girl's identity. In a lot of cultures that many of us grew up in, we don't really talk about sex or tendencies of the opposite gender, but especially in this day and age, having that kind of knowledge can really save our children from so much. Now, this is a really loaded topic that I've actually considered doing a whole other discussion on. But for now, there are so many stories of girls who are modest or regular masjid goers who ended up having sexual relations with the boy because the boy said that he plans to marry her one day and it's okay that they have relations together. And with technology at our fingertips, we really should be the first to empower our daughters with knowledge so they know how to react and what to expect. Does anyone else want to comment about this chapter? Have any questions? Okay, Melissa mentions that your example reminds me of the movie with Madonna and Tom Hanks about the first women baseball league and how making sure the players were pretty and look good in uniform skirts so they could get attention from media in order to get support for girls in the game, period. Exactly, I've seen that movie. That's exactly how it is, and it hasn't changed. Is that sad? It hasn't changed. That's still the situation. It's made like women's sports or women's clothing, everything about women in general is made as entertainment or sexualization. I remember reading something else, a little off topic, but how the heads of Victoria's Secret, or all, even the designers, the execs, they're all men. They don't even ask a woman's opinion about what to make or what's comfortable or any of that. They're all decided by men. Doesn't make sense, but that's the culture nowadays. That is the culture that we are raising our daughters in. Okay, so the second factor that he talks about in the book is social media. I'm not sure how much of it he discussed in the first book, especially because when he wrote the book, social media has since blown up tremendously. So there's a lot of things that he talked about which were really more contemporary to our time. Dr. Sax mentions that when tweens and teenagers write and post photos online, they are seeking to please, entertain, amuse, impress their friends. It's a kind of performance. On the other hand, when you are writing in a diary where no one will ever see it, you can write whatever you want at whatever length. You can explore your thoughts and feelings through your writing. The more time kids spend on social media, the more likely they are to become depressed. I think more than kids, I think that also counts for adults as well. With what he said in mind about kids and media, can you guys tell me what age do you think you'll ever let your daughter specifically, especially because social media affects girls more than in a different way than it affects boys? What age do you think you'll let your daughter use social media? Or if your daughter already has it? Okay. Iman says college. That sounds like a good age. Or if your daughter already has one, at what age did you let her get it? What platform did you start her with? Or what platform do you think you'll start her with? I think one thing that's for sure is that I hope that I'm on the same platform that she's on, because I think that's a great way to kind of always keep an eye on them. Farhana says that she'll start at 15. Oh, 15 sounds like a good age too. Okay. Ayesha mentions that realistically speaking, she's, I guess, 15, although college would be preferred. She doesn't want her to resent her. That's true. And I think what I really liked about the book was that Dr. Sax mentions a lot of times how to get your kid to not like to be close to you and be friends with you, but not make it seem in front of their friends that they want to do something, but instead pit it on the parents. Amy mentioned 16 or older. That's what came to mind. That sounds about right. Like 15, 16, I think that's about 10th grade in high school. And at that point, it does become a big deal. Like at a certain point, you can't stop them, right? You have to at least be with them so they're not making any secret accounts, or, you don't know where they're getting their like social media bit from. And Ayesha mentioned that Dr. Sax mentioned for us to stay relevant, which means I may have to open a TikTok account. Yes. I think we might all have to open all these social media platforms. We need to know what's up and coming, what's modern, what's relevant at this time, so that we can then help them through it and navigate these social media platforms in a very responsible way. This is also where, okay, we have another comment. It says, I would want to wait until 15, 16, but how realistic would it be with friends and cousins that might be allowed more privileges? That's so true. And I think what I like about what he says in the book is that, which is the point I'm going to come to, is that your parenting counts in all of this. Like no matter who's doing what, teaching them that it doesn't matter what other people are doing, and giving them the logical response of why or why not they are not on social media and things like that. And then they can go back to their friends and their cousins and be like, oh, my mom doesn't let me do this. My mom's awful. But in the end, you're still saving them from being all those platforms. So this is the chapter where Dr. Sax also discusses the right amount of parenting, which is the authoritative style. This parent is firm, but not excessively rigid. Rules can bend to accommodate special circumstances. These parents communicate their love, but they also enforce the rules in a fair and consistent manner. Now, he recommends limiting their time on social media to 30 minutes per day. Now, how many of us can limit ourselves on social media for 30 minutes? Can anyone here honestly say they can do that? Here's how he suggests that we do that. We can sit down with our daughters and explain the rationale behind their limits. We can explain what we want prioritized in their life. And he also mentioned monitoring all the devices that your daughter uses and limiting where and when they use their device. And I loved how he gave such practical examples. Like, they might not like that it's being monitored, but how that'll save them from so much, like even in front of their friends, you know, like if they don't want to do something compromising or be in an uncomfortable position, all they have to do is blame their parents and not look bad or be embarrassed in front of their friends. Now, there's no guarantee in parenting, right? But if your daughter has years of practice doing it the right way, the odds that she will do it the right way at college or later on in life are better than if she does not have that practice. And I love that because with kids, I think a lot of people notice that, you know, you say something once, your kid doesn't listen. You say it for 5 years, they finally start listening. I mean, I really do think it takes that long. I know it takes 30 days to make a habit, but I feel like for kids, it takes so much longer. But if we keep at it, they're sure to follow and to listen and understand and make good habits themselves. That he mentioned, the third factor that he talks about in the next chapter is dreams and obsessions. Girls have obsessive tendencies. In that, she seizes one aspect of her identity, which can be her weight, it could be her grades, it could be her sports, something that she's good at, a talent, and she focuses on it to the exclusion of everything else. Now, what are some other obsessions you can think of in Muslim girls? I have some in mind that I'm thinking of, but what are some that you guys can think of? What are some things that girls nowadays might be obsessed with? Again, he mentioned sports, could be grades, could be weight. What are some other things? I was actually thinking makeup, maybe. Makeup could be a huge one. Like people, yeah, there we go. Yeah, makeup. Okay, there's a lot of makeups coming through. Fashion, yes, fashion's a big one. Looks, yep, looks is also a big one. Looks, makeup, fashion, they all kind of go together, right? Body, yes. It all goes into like appearance, right? Unfortunately, that can be an obsession. He mentions that girls' sports done right can really help girls to focus on who they are rather than how they look. No matter what your daughter gets into, you have to understand your daughter's motivations. Where is the hole in her soul that she's trying to fill? Someone also mentioned hijab styles. I think that's a real good one. That can be an obsession as well. Now, something I started to do, actually before that, this goes back to us first and foremost. Did we create a very specific niche for them and now they're stuck in it? Did I push sports so much on my daughter that she feels as though she's only successful if she plays the sport well? Did I tell her that she has to do so well in school and get into this specific college, and if she doesn't, then she's not successful? What are we saying to them? What kind of words are we using for them? Now, something I started doing, thanks to the book, is asking my daughter, who are you? And making sure she's not defining herself based on what she does. Because who she is, but based on who she is and who she aspires to be. Now, our goal is to help our daughters connect with who they are in a way that doesn't depend on what grades they're getting, how well they're doing in sports, how much they weigh, how great their makeup is, how long it takes to put your hijab on, right? Also, ask them, what do they like to do for fun? Make sure they know how to have fun, right? And I think the hardest part for a lot of us, especially as our kids are getting older, is just to be a good listener. We have this really wonderful group in New Jersey called Mom Talks. It's a group that was started by a really good friend of mine, Fatma Mian, where we get together with other moms, and there are a few rules to follow. And one of them is that when you talk about something, you let everyone know whether what you want to say is just ranting or venting or just letting everyone know something or getting off your chest, or whether you're looking for advice. This goes the same with your daughter. Ask if she wants your advice or if you're just looking for a listening ear. It's a great tactic to begin that trust and that relationship with your kids. Now, my daughter turned 10 this year, and I've been shifting gears a lot with how I've been parenting her. I've tried to stop and not, let's say, parent as much, but be more friendly with her. And it's been an interesting transition, to say the least, and I'm still trying to figure a lot of it out. But it's an important one, because if I want us to have a successful relationship in the future, I know that I need to move from that parent to that friend, but still parent within that friendship, right? And since we are the ones that are the direct role models for our girls, I want you all to think of yourself. What do you do for fun? How would you describe yourself in 2 or 3 words? Now, how would you respond if I said, tell me about yourself? This is something we look for in our own girls, but what about ourselves? If anybody wants to answer, you're more than welcome to. The questions I just asked were, tell me about yourself. How would you describe yourself in 2 words? And what do you do for fun? This is especially important because since we are their role models, are we having fun? Are we describing ourselves in ways that are not just, oh, you know, I cook and clean, or I homeschool, or, you know, whatever it is that you do? One thing that he mentioned, Dr. Sax mentions in the book, is that community matters, especially for girls. If we are in a community where certain things are impermissible, alhamdulillah, as Muslims, like alcohol, it is looked down upon, then they have a less probability of being into it. However, it doesn't make them immune to those things, right? These are still discussions we should have with our daughters, regardless if we deem that they will not be accessible to her. Oh, thank you. So Farhana shared that her words would be creative, passionate, crafting, and sewing. Those are great words. And the fun is definitely hard, especially as parents, right? And even just getting out or having that me time or whatever it is that you need to do to have your fun. Now, he devotes a lot of the chapter to alcohol and how it's becoming a prevalent problem among girls, especially because it starts early and it affects you a lot later in life. Now, again, we might not think it's a problem that we have, but it is something we should still have, like that discussion with our daughters. There is one thing that he did mention that I thought we could even use, a tip that he mentioned that we could even use in a different way. And the tip he said was that we should have a code word or phrase that you and your daughter agree on in advance to help her get out of a bind. I love this tip because it has everything to do with making sure that she trusts me, and that if she's ever in a bind or in a situation where she's uncomfortable, maybe there's backbiting going on within a group of friends, or maybe something else is going on where she feels uncomfortable, there has to be a way that she can communicate to me, that I can come and save her without embarrassing her in front of her friends. And I thought this was great because there's always situations, whether you have good friends or not, you know, anything could happen where you feel uncomfortable. And I think it's wonderful to have that code word that just, you know, brings you back and, you know, have someone save you without, again, embarrassing yourself in front of your friends. I love that advice. Dr. Sass also mentions that the core intervention you have to undertake as a parent is to ensure that your daughter develops a strong sense of self and that she develops confidence in her identity that doesn't depend on what her grades are, what sports she plays, or other extracurriculars. If you don't know who you are, you become vulnerable to dreams and obsessions like cutting, anorexia, or drugs. Those are some of the examples that he gave in the book. One key to a healthy, happy, and fulfilled life is to live each stage of your life to its fullest. I loved how he ended that chapter because that was a great reminder for myself as well, right? Just to live each stage to its fullest. Don't just rush to go to the next stage. So the fourth factor is environmental toxins. Humans have the longest childhood of any animal on the planet. Children need that time in order to expand their potential before the onset of puberty. What really got to me was the human brain is incredibly plastic before the onset of puberty. And once puberty hits, the potential to learn completely new things is reduced. And he discusses a bunch of factors that cause early onset puberty. What did you guys find to be the most astonishing? I know there's a bunch that I was just like, whoa, I didn't know that. But what were some that you thought were really just really out there and you just never knew that it caused early onset puberty? I know he mentioned the BPA, making sure that you don't warm things or carry things in plastic containers. Yep, okay, so Ayesha mentioned BPA. Warming things in plastic containers, or even drinking juice or other drinks that are on the grocery shelf in a regular plastic container. Sometimes like the apple juices or the V8s or the Snapples are always in plastic containers, because even if you don't leave it out in heat, you don't know where it has traveled. I thought that was really interesting. Or the peat containers, the phthalates, and the plastic wraps, not warming anything in the microwave with the plastic wrap. He also mentions growing up with your biological father, and the whole section on the pheromones was so incredibly interesting. He basically said that if a girl has a dad who is loving and physically affectionate with her, where he gives her hugs, then she will on average go through puberty at a later age. That was just, I know I read that to my husband like multiple times. I'm like, gotta be more affectionate with her. The other thing he mentions is soft drinks and how that affects girls differently more actually than it affects boys, in terms of early onset puberty and also a lack of exercise. Okay, so what can we do? And the first thing, first chapter he talks about is the mind. And he talks about something that I am always guilty of, which is risky play in childhood. I'm a huge proponent of letting kids take a lot of risks and challenges and kind of doing like crazy things. But risky play is a part of childhood. How can we make an anxious child take risks early on? We can, first of all, stop saying no. If they want to do something, really look at how much of a risk it is, right? Is it dangerous for their, like, is it life-threatening, or is it like a little hurt threatening, you know? If they want to cook, let them. If they want to climb a tree, let them. Dr. Sax actually mentions a story of how he let his daughter climb a tree and she fell and she broke her wrist and she ended up having a cast. And he was totally okay with that, because that's, you know, that's part of growing up, and that's okay that she broke it. You know, what are some of the riskiest things that you have, that your kids have asked you about? I'm not going to ask if you let them do it, but what are some of the riskiest things your kids have asked you about? I know for us, my kids always want to climb. They want to climb like everything, like rocks, walls, balconies. They're big climbers. And the cooking was a huge thing, where it took me a few kids to realize I just need to let them cook, and now they can cook on their own. And that's definitely a risk a lot of us are sometimes hesitant about, but there's so much benefit in letting them cook. I mean, that's a risk worth taking for sure. He also mentions how taking risks makes them resilient. Melissa mentions that hers wants to stay home alone at ages 7 and 8. Yeah. Melissa, my 4-year-old wants to stay home alone. He's like, just leave me. Oh, for hours. So Melissa says he wants to stay, they want to stay home alone for hours. Okay. A couple of stillness mentions, my son wants to ride his father's skateboard. He's 6 and we just started letting him do it in flat area with a helmet. Oh, that's great. You know, 6 is a great age to start skateboarding. Hi, T with Fada mentions bungee jumping. Well, maybe if you're attached to him, what about that? And then Farhana said that I don't let her for anything, especially fry anything, especially if it's hot. Oh, fry oil, if it's hot oil. Yeah, like I said, the cooking thing, I think that's a risk worth taking, because it's just, you know, they might get hurt a little bit, they might get burnt but if you're watching them the whole time, then next thing you know, you might have to fry anything anymore because they're frying everything for you. It's great. Look at the benefits. Irshana mentioned that her kids like to climb. Sounds like my kids. And Amy said, I let my son go from the park close to my house by himself. He's 7. That's great. You know, nowadays we hear all these stories about people calling the cops on kids that are walking out, but it hasn't happened in my neighborhood. I haven't heard it in like where I am in New Jersey. So, and it's allowed by the law. So why not? S2214 said, I feel a lot of anxiety letting my 4-year-old take any risk. I feel like I grew up with a lot of no's. It's hard to gauge what's a good risk. And then Frana said, maybe when she's a little older. That's the hard part, right? So I'll give you an example with the cooking thing, at least, is that, or not with the cooking, with anything, actually. If we keep saying no, guess what? They're going to stop asking. And then when you want them to do that thing, they're going to be like, they're not going to be interested anymore. So a lot of it also has to do with keeping their interest by letting them do it, but being with them, showing them how to do something, right? Holding their hand through the process, whether it's climbing or cooking, making them take calculated risks so that then they can still feel the security and the safety of you, and they can still do it, and they can still feel that accomplishment that they can do it. That's one thing that happened with cooking in our house, is that when I let them do it, then they were off on their own. And I realized if I don't let them do it, guess what? It's only a couple more years we're going to be like rolling their eyes like, I don't want to do it. I have one kid who loves washing dishes. She wanted to wash dishes since like she was 5 years old. And first couple times I said no, she kept asking, and I just let her then, because I'm like, you know what? I know now, because I had older kids by that time, that they don't want to wash dishes later on. But if they want to wash them now, go for it. Like, knock yourself out washing those dishes. So Ayesha said, swimming in deep and without floaties, they've taken lessons and they're okay swimmers, but I just can't let go. Then they say, see, mama, we can do it. That's great. I feel like they're teaching you so much about that, right? About like, look, they're so proud of their achievements that they can do it, right? That's wonderful. He mentions how it makes them, like, taking risks makes them resilient. And it's so true. This summer, my daughter fractured her wrist. She was scootering, and she ended up getting a cast for a few weeks. And I feel like it made her even more fearless to do more daring things, which might cause anxiety some people. But it's just, right now, those daring things are very physical. That's true. But I'm hoping that later on, that resiliency and that ability to do daring things makes her more confident in other endeavors in her life. So we have to see where this translates, right? This resiliency, this daring, the risk taking. Right now, it could be different as kids, but as they grow older, where are they taking risks in their life? What are they doing that's challenging? And how it's changing them in other decisions that they make as adults. Okay, so that was a big bit that he had on risks. If there's no other comments on that, I'm going to move on to what he was saying about friendships, because this was so nice. He said that when kids value friendships with other kids above the relationship they have with their parents, then those kids are at risk. I'm going to read that one more time. When kids value friendships with other kids above the relationship they have with their parents, then those kids are at risk. Now, friendships between kids come and go, and those friendships are fragile, right? But if your daughter knows and always reminds her, and she's always reminded that you're always there to love her, and that your relationship with her is the most important, then her emotional well-being is on a solid foundation. Now, we always try to do, we always make sure we do activities with our kids where none of their friends are there, where it's just us, our family, or their siblings, or just strangers and other kids that they don't know. Why? Because it's just a time for our family to just have a chance to bond and have fun and just be us. And that's so important, to build that relationship so they know that this relationship is what's long lasting, you know, not the friends come and go, but your family, especially if you're trying to make a family that has strong bonds and relationships, that this is not going anywhere. This has a strong foundation. Now, how many of you have heard this growing up? You could just raise a hand or just say yes. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I'm sure a lot of people have heard it. I mean, I know we used to like say it on the playground. Whenever someone would say something mean, you'd go back to them and say sticks and stones. I know nowadays, he mentions this in the book too, and this is so true. There's such sensitivity to certain things, and how A lot of people make mountains out of molehills. But one thing I loved what he said was kind of taking it back to how, kind of like how we grew up, was that we need to teach our daughters that they are strong, and that while sticks and stones may break their bones, words will never hurt them. Because what you do then is that you decrease the risk that a child will experience real lasting harm when they hear any negative words or unkind words. Because guess what? Unfortunately, it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. What we have to do is make them strong so that when they do hear those words, it doesn't bother them, it doesn't faze them. And this is all part of self-control. Self-control in childhood is a far better predictor of success. Self-control in childhood is a far better predictor of success. Health, wealth, and happiness in adulthood, it's more important than, like, for example, grades in school, right? Governing your feelings, learning how to gather information, being charitable towards others. This is something we're trying to instill in all of our kids from such a young age too. And at this point, you know what comes to mind? Daniel Tiger, right? It's a show for like pre-K kids, for 3-year-olds even. He's famous for saying, when you're feeling mad and you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4, right? And what are we essentially teaching them with that song or with all these techniques? We're teaching them self-control. And it's not something that's hardwired, right? It's not something that's determined at birth. It's something that you can teach. It's something that she can and she has to learn. And especially in, as we say, the girl world and with girl drama, it's definitely something that really makes you stronger. And if you want to survive, then self-control is definitely a very important aspect of it. So that was what he had mentioned about the mind and teaching our daughters how to govern that. The next chapter, he talks about the body. Now, this chapter assumes that you already know that physical education is important for girls. If you have any questions or comments about that, please post it up. I could definitely talk about that. Now, when Farial read this book a few months ago, I think it was even last year. I think it was last year, yeah. I remember she called me up and she goes, Ayesha, they have to jump. We need to add something for the girls where they jump. And I remember being, okay, Farial, like, okay, well, we can, I don't know, we can have them jump, or we can go hiking or something, we can have them jump. And I was so confused until I read this chapter, and how he mentioned that specific sports are much better for girls' development and for their knees and for their bones than like other sports. And these sports are more catered towards girls and their health than other sports. And jumping is a huge part of that. Now, my oldest daughter has played a plethora of sports throughout the years. Her main sport now is soccer, and we still encourage her to do other sports precisely because of this chapter, and for overall endurance and reducing the risk of any injury. Her soccer coach happens to be female, alhamdulillah, so we're really blessed in that realm. And when I asked her about how she does her warm-ups at practice, they also align with what the book mentioned. And so I'm really blessed about that. I'm really happy that is the case for her. But since we have done so many sports with my daughter and with my son, we've realized that sports are more geared towards boys. Just like I talked about how sports uniforms are more geared towards boys, so are the sports themselves. But that's something we have to speak up about and find a sport that fits our daughter's personality and her body. Now, when I say sport, it doesn't have to be something that uses the ball, or it doesn't have to be like soccer or baseball. There's so many different things that your daughter can do. It can be competitive. It doesn't have to be competitive, right? It just has to be some type of movement. And it's so much. One thing he mentions is that to pick the right sport for your daughter. And one thing I want to mention was that it's so much easier to steer your 6-year-old daughter in a healthy direction than it is to ask your 10-year-old daughter to change her sports and friends. He quoted this exactly, and I happen to have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and this is so true. We're just getting our 6-year-old involved more seriously in sports. She's dabbled in many different things so that we could kind of figure out what she enjoys and what she's actually good at. And it's so much easier to convince her, like, hey, let's not do cheerleading. Not that we've exposed her to it, but just mentioning, let's not do cheerleading, let's do soccer or something else, right? But if I ask my 10-year-old to leave soccer for any reason, that's definitely not happening at her age. If there's any questions about girls and sports and staying active, you're welcome to post it. We've done many sports with my daughter over the years, from she's done like karate to tennis to ice hockey. So I have a little bit of experience in the sports realm. A question, when did you start your daughters in sports? So I started my eldest when she was 3. We put her in soccer and she hated it. She absolutely hated soccer. So we did that for, I think, 1 term, and then that's it. She didn't want to do it again. Then we tried a bunch of other different things. The point at that age, at 4 and 5, is just to keep them active and to figure out what they're good at and what they're interested in. So we expose her to a lot of different sports. I mentioned a bunch of them until she finally, what happened was my son started playing soccer and she'd have to come to practice with us. So then she saw the soccer and wanted to play again and try it again. She was 7 by that time. But I would say start at a young age, because the point is to be active and to have fun. If you find a sport or any like physical activity that's a little too, maybe a little too much at a young age and your daughter's not liking it, definitely pull her out, because that's not the point of it, right? Swimming is a great sport as well. Melissa asked, were any differences mentioned about team sports versus individual ones, such as martial arts? No, they weren't. He didn't mention any differences. I think he said that he didn't mention the difference between team and individual. He said it was very personality driven. So I know he mentioned a story of a girl who really liked canoeing. And then, so her parents and the doctor asked her if she wanted to do like competitive canoeing. And she's like, no, I just want to canoe. So she found a group that just canoes leisurely, and he said that counts, because that's still some sort of physical activity. So she was just canoeing and do like some like crew or road type stuff. So it doesn't really matter if it's competitive or if it's a team sport or anything like that. And again, the pressure and all that, that's very dependent on the individual. So he didn't promote or demote anything specifically. Hi Tea with Farah mentions putting multiple kids in organized sports can get expensive. Yes, it can. Yes, it can get expensive. But one thing I want to mention is that if you're part of like a township recreation, if your township has a recreation department, definitely ask them for financial assistance, because that's what they're there for, and they're willing to help. They usually don't say no to anybody, and they have funds to help people who either can't afford it, or if it's getting too much. Check for sibling discounts if you have multiple kids. And, you know, essentially, I guess you have to find something that, you know, that fits into your budget, because sports does get expensive. Even just like competitive team fees, and I'm not even counting equipment, which is like a whole separate fee. Melissa asked, you mentioned specific physical activities for the physical development of girls. Could you go into that more? Sure. So in the book, he mentions a lot about how, for example, girls are more prone to knee injuries than boys are. And it has a lot to do with our bone development as women and things like that. So he mentioned how our physical makeup is very different than a boy's physical makeup. And so things like jumping and things like that are just more conducive to how we are built. Did the girls like karate, or was it too much for them? So Hafsa enjoyed karate. She did it longer than Hamza, than my son, actually. She did it longer than he did. Again, it's a personality thing, totally. There's so many sports out there for them, and it really depends on the girl and what she likes to do. A couple of Solis mentions local shop. Mount Everest rents free snowboards and skis for kids under 5. I've done it with my 6-year-old son, and I'm doing it with my almost 3-year-old daughter this year. Yes, there are so many opportunities like skiing and snowboarding that can be free, or just a great way to try it out. One thing we always did with some sports or activities was just say, can we try it out once or twice? We don't know if we want to commit yet. That's where your township's rec department comes in. Before you want to sign them up for, let's say, competitive travel or something like that, ask them to just do like, you know, like a fun rec type thing. Or if you want to try martial arts or something like that, Ask for like a free trial week. I wouldn't say one day. One day won't give you a good assessment. Maybe like a week or two before you commit long term. Especially if it's an equipment financial issue, you can get borrowed equipment most likely. I know our township does a lot of, they give away a lot of rental. All you have to do is give a deposit in case you damage the equipment. Otherwise, you can easily get it. All you have to do is ask. That's what I always say. He also mentions along the same lines is that a girl makes most of her bone between 6 and 17 years of age. By the time she's 17, a young woman has acquired more than 90% of all the bone minerals she will ever have. After the age of 24, it's mostly downhill. Thanks, Dr. Sax. Being active is so important for girls. By 8 years of age, girls who are more active have significantly stronger bones than girls who are less active. And he really pushed how girls really need to drink milk. And they need to drink, he said they need to drink cow's milk. This is obviously after, like he's not comparing breast milk and cow's milk, but what he's saying was like they don't need almond milk and soy milk and that. They need cow's milk or goat's milk because they need that to develop their bones. And then, as I mentioned, he said the best exercise for girls is to jump from 2 feet high down. Now, I was reading this part aloud, and my 6-year-old asked if that means she can jump from the couches down. I mean, if it helps her jump more and has significant benefits, go for it, I guess, right? One more thing I was just thinking to mention was, okay, I don't remember what it was. I'll come back to it. But an important takeaway from this chapter was you should meet your body where it is. Be comfortable in your body, work in your fitness, but be at home in your own body. And the body image is something that we as mothers project to our daughters more than anything. We need to meet our bodies where they are. We need to be comfortable in our body, and we need to exemplify fitness, but also be okay with our bodies where they are. And that's a chapter on sports. If there's any more questions, please post it. I will do my best to answer them. But this was definitely a great chapter about physical activity and what is more conducive to a female body than like a male body. He also mentioned that one more statistic I want to mention was that girls are more prone to concussions than boys are. It's also because boys have more cerebral fluid, which helps, it acts more like a shocker than for girls. So these are just like some like physical things that we should just keep in mind when we pick a sport for our kids. I think he said to avoid ice hockey, figure skating, and cheerleading. So if that benefits anybody. Sure, elaborate more on how mamas can be more comfortable in their body. It's about how, I would say it's about how we project ourselves in front of our daughters. Am I complaining about my weight, right? Am I saying, oh, look at me, like, you know, I have a flab here, a flab there. Things like that, you know, like they see like, if I'm being active, if I'm taking my fitness seriously, and I'm projecting that to my daughter and showing her, look, I'm working hard, and yeah, I might, you know, like, and I'm happy with how I look, right? But I'm still working hard at it so I can stay healthy. One thing to always remind them is that the health part is more important than the looks part of it. If anyone else wants to add to that, I'd love to hear some more insight on how we can show our daughters that we are more comfortable in our own bodies. Okay. And if anyone comments, I'll definitely add that to the discussion, inshallah. Okay, so we have another comment that says, I recently noticed my 4-year-old looking at a picture of herself and criticizing how she looks. It's hard. It's hard, especially when they're young, right? We should maybe even check, like, you know, one thing is that, like, are we taking pictures of ourselves and like looking at it? Or are we looking at ourselves a lot? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's just so many things to check as we raise our daughters, is that they are looking at us so closely and they are mirroring everything, right? So making sure that we're comfortable with our body images and our looks, and they can be comfortable with their body image and their looks. Okay, so the next chapter, the last chapter, is on spirit. This chapter. Now, this chapter was really interesting because it reminded me of how when I was growing up and when I got my first period, I had a period party. It was great. I wasn't the type that was embarrassed or anything because I got to wear a new outfit. I got all these presents. It was awesome. And I want to hear, did any of you have any other rituals that you went through when you had your first periods? I'd love to hear them. But I always made fun of that. You know, growing up afterwards, I always made fun of, oh God, like our culture has period parties. Like, how could you tell the whole world that you got your period and then tell them to come over and party with you because of it? You know, but then I got a wow, lucky you. I guess it was fun. But then I read this chapter. You know, I used to really make fun of that period party, but then I read this chapter and something Dr. Sax says was that the most enduring cultures, which we have any record of, have taken this process, the transition from childhood to adulthood, very seriously. And it's so true. Even in Islam, your deeds and actions are counted starting from when? Starting from puberty, starting from your first period. It is a big deal. That party that I had, that was the first day of my adulthood. And that is something to celebrate so that we can become aware. In today's culture, periods happen with such silence that you don't even realize that you just went through a major breakthrough in your life, that you just went through something that really changes you in the sight of Allah, even if you think of it in one sense, right? Because it's counting. Your prayers are now fard on you, like your fasts are now fard on you. There's so much that goes into it that we have to realize that we are projecting that and letting our daughters know about that. You know, not only should we prepare our daughters for that, but we need to prepare ourselves for that big change. We can't just throw it under the rug like, oh, she got her period, don't tell anybody. Let's keep it quiet. It's not an embarrassing thing. It's actually something we should be happy about. We need to tell our daughters that they need to, okay, so one thing he mentions that we need to tell our daughters that they should become who they are, right? What are they passionate about? What are they good at? More than anything, who are they? And we need to also teach our daughters about what their limits are, what they're not good at, what you probably won't end up doing. Maybe they're not good at numbers, for example, right? Whatever it could be. I mean, I don't want to mention something that's academic, but what if they're not good physically, right? Athleticism is not there. There's so many other things they can do, right? They have to be okay with what they're good with, and they also have to be good with what they're not good with, and making just them more resilient. Okay, so no one else has had a period party, it looks like. No one mentioned anything about any fun things that happened when they got their period. So I guess I was the only one. Okay, and Farhana mentioned, and there's an extreme of treating it like a taboo thing. It is, right? It's so, like, the taboo thing of having a period, that just makes no sense at this time. Farhana mentioned that it used to irritate me so much when my aunts would pretend they were fasting during Ramadan because they didn't want their sons to see them not praying. Yeah, we don't do that in my house. I know when the first time my son asked why I wasn't praying, I told him it's a period. You know, this is what happens to your uterus. And we went through the whole medical terminology of it. And now he knows. And the first couple of times it was, you know, he would keep asking about it, but now it's just so normal for him. Like, oh yeah, mom's not praying. And then I also have a discussion like, oh, by the way, it's called a period, but let's not talk about it to everybody. You know, don't go asking people about their periods. Then Dr. Sax mentions, and we're just finishing up, is that girls who are actively engaged in religious and spiritual life are healthier than girls who aren't. I felt like half this book was just telling us things we already knew in our Islamic culture. So much about raising girls and just growing up as a Muslim. Like, I think it just really just put it all together, I feel like. And it really made me think about all those things that happened to me while growing up and, you know, things I would make fun of culturally, Islamically, or whatever it was, and say, you know what, no, that was right. That was right, you know? Even I don't think I'll have a period party for my daughter, but we'll do something to celebrate. That's all I had for today. I know that was a lot, and I know I went a little fast, but it was just definitely a good book. Again, it was my first time reading it cover to cover without skimming. And I got so much, and it's a book that I ended up buying, and I even highlighted in it, which I rarely do to a book, but there was so much information that I definitely want to go back and read as my kids grow older. Irshana said, I was so thankful to Islam, I always went through the book. Yes, exactly. I was so thankful to Islam because of this book, because everything from the sexuality and the modest clothing to even like talking about puberty or whatever it was, like, or even just saying, yes, there is a difference between men and women. There is a difference between boys and girls. Physically, mentally, there is a huge difference, and we have to learn those differences. May Allah protect our children and allow us to raise healthy kids. Ameen. That's so, yes. Thank you so much for being here and for the great discussion and insights. I know I learned so much from you all. And with that, inshallah, we will see you all soon. Okay.